So obviously, just a bit of housekeeping to start with. As I've mentioned, I'm keeping everybody on mute apart from the speakers just so that we can hear you. If anybody has any questions as we move through the session, then just drop them in the comments. So there's a little chat box at the bottom, and if you pop your question in there, then we'll come to those at the end. So if there are any questions, we can address those live now with Sjanie and Alexandra, because it's always useful to be able to have that opportunity when you don't get that on the replay. So if anybody has any questions, just do that. This summit, the idea of it, just for you guys to kind of hear a bit more about it as well, is all about kind of self-rediscovery. So I'm quite an advocate of helping people to tune into their wisdom, which is why I thought you guys would be amazing to have come speak to us. For me, it's kind of twofold. I think a lot of people kind of think that self-rediscovery is all about who we are in our kind of human form and kind of trying to figure out who we want to be, and that is for me part of it, but it's also about seeing who we are beyond that, and that kind of natural wisdom that is also we're part of. So I kind of, yeah, it's about kind of following that and using and tuning into that to unravel a life that we love. And so we've been hearing from lots of different speakers on different topics, and so it's my hope that people will be able to take what they need from each different topic with all the different speakers. It's live most Fridays, and then the replay is available for everything the whole way through. And I also jump on live in the Facebook community to kind of answer any questions if there are any kind of as we're going along. So if there are any that kind of jump out about this topic afterwards, then I can always get back to you guys and ask if that's the case. So to formally introduce you guys, Sjanie and Alexandra are amazing. They are co-founders of Red School, which I'm sure they'll tell you a little bit about, and they're also Hay House authors of their book Wild Power, which I came across last year, and funnily enough, when I was at Rest Fest with Sjanie earlier this year, I'd seen her on the program and thought, I need to find Sjanie, and just after my talk she just appeared in my room, and so I got out my book and I was like, quick. and yeah, that was really special because it's a nice reminder of how everything's kind of sorted out for us. I didn't need to go and rush around finding her. She just turned up. So that was nice. And so I've been really excited for this conversation because you guys share what you call a radical new approach to women's health and well-being, creativity, leadership, and spiritual life based on the power of the menstrual cycle. So it's quite a unique thing that you guys share, which is amazing. You're published authors and experts in the field of women's wellbeing and spirituality. Your most recent book is Wild Power: Discover the Magic of Your Menstrual Cycle and Awaken the Feminine Path to Power. Between you, you've spent 40 years exploring and learning about menstruality from your own deeply lived experience and the collective knowledge you've gathered from working with thousands of women. Pioneering this field, you've created the most comprehensive and life-changing program available to date, offering in-person workshops, online courses, and professional training in the field of menstruality. So that's the formal bit done. But we kind of want to know a bit more about you guys. So I think I personally always love a bit of a backstory. So I don't know if you guys want to tell us a little bit about what brought you to working with the female cycle so deeply. Like, were you guys suffering with your own issues with the menstrual cycle, or kind of where did that start?
Where did it start? Well, I get asked this question a lot, Nicole. And there's a kind of mysterious, deep, mysterious start to it. And then there's a very precise, classic awakening moment as well. Yeah. And the sort of deep, mysterious start is that really, from my very first bleed, I had a very beautiful experience in my first bleed. I felt very proud and just full of light and just marvellous. And no one had given me cause to think that it should be a positive experience. I was at a girls' boarding school as well, and believing me, they weren't giving out positive messages on menarche, the first bleed. I sort of feel like I was anointed in that moment by grace, because it's a huge opening. The first bleed is a real opening.
Mm.
And each time you bleed, you experience this opening. And through my 20s, I was very passionate about fertility awareness. I thought that all women should know about how their bodies work, and it was very empowering for me. And not to be dependent on a hormonal contraception for my contraception, you know. It's very liberating, and it was just empowering and good. But the big sort of awakening moment happened just before my 31st birthday, when I got the most horrendous menstrual pain. And up until that point, I had had health problems, but not menstrual problems. And my cycle was always very regular. And this pain just came out of left field and just slammed into me. And it was insane, the pain, absolutely insane. And it came back month after month, and it would last for up to 3 days. And this is the amazing thing. I wouldn't do drugs or anything like that. I wasn't into regular medicine. No, I wasn't interested in surgery. I just knew that was not a good path to go down. And I just made this decision to believe in my body and follow it. And I sort of marvel at it now when I say these words, because nothing gave me cause again to do that. But I just really gave space to menstruation as best I could each month, because of course, you know, I went out to work like all the rest of us, and it was challenging because the pain was insane. So where I could, I would really give space to menstruation, and then it was like the veils falling from my eyes. And of course, it wasn't just about menstruation, it was about being mindful of the whole cycle, because I needed to know when I would bleed. And my cycle was very regular, which was a gift. Pain was not a gift. Well, it was a sort of gift in disguise.
I was going to say, yeah.
I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And I really kept faith with myself, Nicole, and I kept faith with my body. And very slowly over time, I began to heal using natural therapies and really giving space to menstruation and not using the drugs, because the drugs just messed things up every month. You know, created the conditions that gave me the pain in the first place. It was just increasing the inflammation. And it, as I say, the veils fell from my eyes, and I really began to enter into the depths of what menstruation itself can give. At this point, it was all about menstruation for me, in that sense, the power of menstruation, this expanded consciousness, this kind of ecstatic or visionary state. I just felt very plugged into something, and it was very powerful. So the pain was easing, so I could start to feel more of the sort of what I call the positives of menstruation. And then from there, Nicole, because I was healing my body, I thought, well, this is good information to share with other women. And so I began running workshops. I was in Sydney at the time. I lived in Australia at that time. And I began doing workshops at Sydney's Royal Hospital for Women at the Health Education Department. And these workshops became very popular. And it was listening to women's stories that kept expanding, because my knowledge at that stage was fairly rudimentary compared with what we teach now. But it was individual women's stories that became these moments of like starbursts of illumination in me. It's like, oh, they'd share something and I'd suddenly go, that's what's happening in the cycle. So everything that we teach at Red School is sourced from our personal lived experience and the lived experience of the women that we work with. And it's like recovering something, or drawing it up through us, not from books. This is very important. And it's like a living body of knowledge, Nicole, that sort of emerged out of us because we cared to pay attention to it. And it was there all along, this knowledge, but because we were taught to ignore the cycle and not trust it, and in fact it was demonized and seen as a problem and a weakness. And that is just all lies. It is all just gross lies. The weakness comes from ignoring it and pushing it away. But the moment you come in sync with it, then this whole kind of cosmos opens up to you, this inner cosmos, if you like. Yeah. And I met Sjanie 11 years ago, or more than 11 years ago, but I was still in Australia, but I would come to England.
Yeah, we met about 16 years ago, actually.
Yeah, because
I started working together 11 years ago.
11 years ago, yeah.
Wow.
And it was just marvellous synchronicities that brought us together. And I mean, the moment we sort of met up again, we've never stopped talking since. You can't get an word in edgeways, you know. But Sjanie, you have your own lovely story that sort of weaves into this as well, which is really nice to share.
Yeah, I was talking about pushing the cycle away, and that's that becomes our kind of weakness really when we try to ignore or avoid or suppress the cycle. Well, that's kind of exactly what I did unknowingly. I went, like many of us, went on contraception. So this was in my late teens, early 20s, and I spent 7 years on contraception, thinking I was doing, the responsible thing. And of course, I completely shut down my cycle. So for seven years, I had no menstrual cycle whatsoever. And I got to experience what that was like, which was it was a very difficult time in my life, because I now refer to it as the 7 lean years, because there was this deadness in me, and I struggled really to connect with myself, and I was kind of numb and a bit sort of disorientated, actually, I recognize now, and and kind of stuck in my life. And luckily I had symptoms that then kind of got my attention, and I realized I needed to come off contraception. And when I did, that was where I had the experience of my cycles returning, and really got to see just what a different experience it is to be in a body that is alive with this cyclical intelligence. And when my cycles came back, it was like I really woke up from the inside, and I could feel myself, and I felt more in myself, connected to myself, alive. There was more texture in my feeling life. There was more variety in my inner experience, which actually makes for a whole lot of color, and more sensitivity in my system. That meant I could feel more and connect more and have more intimacy in my experience of life. So it was very, very apparent to me that the cycle is source of aliveness. And of course, my whole life started to change, with this new movement and rhythm in my being. Things started to move and open up. And really that was where I connected in with my calling, which is to serve menstruality, really. Not that I knew that at the time, but there was this sort of magnetic pull in me that just drew me towards what I was really kind of seeking. It was very interesting, like the sort of internal tracking device. And I can remember all these little random synchronicities that happened, and you just know things, and off you go, and then it's sort of, you like, whoa, that was a good move, and it's only in retrospect you realize actually how much you knew, but you didn't know you knew that. Yeah. And it was things like my connection with Alexandra, which was a very innocent move, and then I look back, I'm like, that was the best move of my life, reaching out to her and saying, should we meet up for lunch when she came back from us. That whole thing, it turned out to be so full of knowing. And really, I feel like my cycle, since it's returned, has been an incredible source of guidance. Really connected me to my intuition in a way that has served me.
Yeah. Wow. And to me, it sounds, from both of your journeys, it's very much kind of a journey of really trusting your body as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Nicole. It is this deep trust in the body, the rightness, the body sort of being, really. When I say body, it's the physical body, but it's the emotional body.
It's this intelligence that is creating the rhythm of our being. Yeah, that is so rich with wisdom.
Yeah, I like to kind of describe it as the natural intelligence of life when I'm talking about it, because one of my favorite things that I heard was that we don't tell our hearts how to beat, and we don't tell our lungs how to breathe, and and it's the same for our minds as well. I think it's like our psychology, if we leave it alone, will always return us back to, you know, balance and who we are. But it sounds very much like that was kind of your seeing, and I think that was quite a brave thing, because in society we're kind of conditioned away from all of this, almost. And
it was brave, Nicole.
yeah.
I mean, you know, it's only in the last 5 years that menstruation has really hit the press. It's been suddenly, it was about 5 years ago, something really shifted in the field, and now, you know, menstruation just can't keep out of the press now. It's the right old hussy.
It is, and you know, since Wild Power came out, which was in 2017, you know, now cycle awareness is everywhere. But it's hard to remember that before that, really no one was talking about. I mean, cycle awareness was just not on the radar. So for 30 odd years, Alexandra was really out there feeling away in the dark, and really having to trust her own experience over and above, you know, over and above the textbooks. And
nothing. There was no affirmative language. And in fact, if anything, you know, I was dismissed, or just, especially my generation of feminists, not good. No.
And how did you know to trust it? Because I think if I was listening to this and I'm not really quite getting the trust element of it, it's like, how do you know? What does that feel like when you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
Gosh, that's a big question.
Mm.
I don't know how to answer it, Nicole. I just couldn't abandon myself on this. Well, the cycle wouldn't abandon me. That was it. Because remember, I had to stop at menstruation so that to ease the pain, you see, because actually just stopping at menstruation eases pain, but also because I didn't want to take painkillers. So in my work, I was a psychotherapist, part-time, as well as working in schools as a teacher of English. And I would say to my therapy clients, I'm going to have my period next week, so I won't be seeing you because I don't want to take drugs. Yeah. So I gave space to menstruation. And in the act of giving space to menstruation, I would have these experiences and I'd go, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, it would be so powerful. Even as there was still discomfort and pain, there were these very powerful experiences. Then I'd sort of crawl out of menstruation and go, whoa, what was all that about? Because I'd come out and, you know, it's like it didn't happen. It was like there was, and then I'd get up to ovulation and go, maybe I'm making it up. I honestly used to have those thoughts. Then I'd go back around to menstruation again and I'd bleed and I go, oh no, oh wow. It's like being on drugs, you know, it was high. It was so amazing. And I just couldn't abandon that. I mean, I have a willful nature.
Yes. Yeah.
But I actually also think it goes back, I think I came coded for this work, you see, Nicole. That goes back to that first bleed. That's why I mentioned it. Mm. And I had a very powerful awakening experience just before my first bleed. And there is, before a girl bleeds, there is this sort of almost third eye opening that goes on. It's a huge expanded moment. And I think that awakening experience I had about 2 months before was part of the whole thing. So I felt like this great wash of grace came into me. And even as my life, you know, was difficult and, you know, I had struggles with health and so on, I always had this abiding sense of grace, of something meaningful at work.
Yeah, I love
and that helped me.
Yeah, I think that for me, when I'm in my wisdom, there's almost like a settled feeling.
It's a beautiful word, that, Nicole. Yes.
And I think that is kind of a nice pointer. It's like, you know, because it's kind of settled and you feel...
It is settling. That's a lovely, it is. It's soothing. It's just,
It's an interesting question, that of, you know, trust, because it comes up a lot for people. We all know that it's a good thing to trust, and you can't make yourself trust.
Yeah.
So I was reflecting on what you were asking, and I think this is one of the real gifts of the cycle, is actually all you have to do is pay attention to your cycle, and your cycle actually teaches you how to trust in the intelligence of life and in your own innate knowing. The cycle actually teaches you that. It's one of the gifts that comes through the practice of cycle awareness. And so I would, in terms of how you're trusting, that experience of feeling settled, I would say is definitely true. But also there, for me, there is a patience that I feel. When I trust, urgency leaves me, because I'm being held by a bigger timing. And my cycle has really taught me that is to, it's a patience, I think, that's
another lovely word
for me.
Like an acceptance, maybe, do you think?
Yeah,
well,
the rightness of all things. And it's not my timing that I'm trying to drive or dictate, or I really feel held by the natural organization within me,
That's lovely. Yeah,
cycle really gives you that.
I love what you say about awareness as well. I'm just thinking, maybe you guys can talk a little bit through kind of what you share about this, then, about the menstrual cycle, and maybe go through some of the seasons. I don't know whether that would help for people who may not understand what exactly it is that you have found out.
Well, we found out a lot, and we write about a lot of it in Wild Power. So what we can do is give you sort of some broad brushstrokes. I mean, there are these 3 maps that we describe, which really name the experiences that we have through the different stages and phases of the menstrual cycle, and the different energies and capacities that we move through in the different places in the menstrual cycle. And really, these maps are not there to dictate to you what you ought to experience, like a mirror. So they've come from, as Alexandra said, all these women's collective experiences, and they're a mirror that will help to illuminate your personal and individual experience. The only way for you to truly discover this for yourself is to practice menstrual cycle awareness, which is the phrase that we've coined for this very particular practice of paying attention to where you are in your cycle, how your mood and energy shifts, what your mental state is like, what your emotional state is like, what your natural tendencies are, your needs, because they are ever changing. They change day by day and phase by phase in the cycle. So the practice is what's going to help to illuminate your experience of the cycle. And these maps that we share will sort of help you to kind of be able to place what's happening and make sense and meaning of them. So just very briefly, I'll just speak of the kind of probably the central map, and it's it's probably the most accessible place to start, which is the map of the 4 seasons, the 4 inner seasons of the cycle, and they relate to the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle: the phase of menstruation, phase of pre-ovulation, ovulation, and the premenstruum. And we liken them to the seasons of the year because the kinds of experiences you have are very kind of resonant with what you might see out in nature. It really reflects something of what is archetypal for women to experience in these different places. So menstruation, we call the inner winter, pre-ovulation, the inner spring, ovulation, the inner summer, and the premenstruum, the inner autumn. And in Wild Power, we really flesh out some of the sort of dominant qualities and tones and feeling powers that you might access in these phases. And it's really fun to kind of notice that in yourself and be like, oh, wow, yes, I really do feel so much more sort of inner and soft and disinterested in the world and still at menstruation, for example. And then to kind of feel and notice when you shift seasons, like from winter to the end of spring, you'll notice how something in you changes. Like you rev up a gear and suddenly there's more energy in your system and you feel a little more excited and enthusiastic about the world. You're suddenly sort of interested in things again. You've got this motivation. or you might notice, you know, in the summer, that suddenly you feel really sociable and out there and like on top of the world, like you can do anything, sort of a real capacity. Or you might notice in the autumn, there's this sort of gearing down in your system and this like pull inward, and that your feeling life returns, and that you start to feel more intuitive, more instinctive, and more discerning. So, you know, these are some of the things you'll notice. That's the kind of quick overview of one of the maps, and it's a very useful way to make sense of your experience, I think, and deepen into it.
I love that. It's like, it is really, I think once you begin to understand something, that's what kind of helps you find some freedom with it, because otherwise you're just kind of walking around blindly, not really knowing what's going on. You're still having it's still happening, but it's when you really see that actually there is a wisdom to it, there is a natural rhythm to it, much like in nature. That can be quite freeing, because you kind of realize that it's normal, and that's
exactly, Nicole, especially when you're in the sort of very inner time, or the more vulnerable time, where you can often feel more anxious or depressed, you know, or it feels like you've run out of energy. It doesn't feel like there's much energy in the systems, and often at that point you might sort of start to feel like, what's the point, you know, things feel a little bit hopeless, and then suddenly you bleed, and then new life returns, and suddenly you're full of ideas. You know, one minute you had no ideas and you didn't know what the hell you were doing, and the next minute, like, you've got ideas to fuel a lifetime. And it's this marvelous, and you develop trust in the different states of being, and a natural trust that life does return. Because I always think at this, you know, for instance, in the seasons of the year, you know, right now we're at the tail end of winter, and you know how it kind of just goes on and on. You're thinking, will spring ever make a showing? Just, you know, go, you know, and because winter, it's just so dead. And then out of nowhere, we have this outrageousness that happens at spring, you know, this return of life. It's just so magical, and we have that in our being every month.
And what you were saying, Nicole, is so many women feel so wrong about themselves and wonder what's wrong with themselves, because they spend half the cycle you feeling in what most people considered like a not okay state, because either they don't want to be around other people, or they're feeling impatient, or they're feeling irritable, or what have you, and they think there's something wrong with them. But actually, when you recognize the phases that you're moving through, and you understand that there's a purpose to that, and really it is a time to separate from other people, it is a time to have more space for yourself, it is a time to come back to your inner life. And the reason you feel irritable is because you're kind of not going with that. And then the moment you realize, actually, oh, this is right and good and needed, suddenly you feel dignified and good about yourself, and all this layers of shame and self-criticism just really start to fall away. And it's, you know, that's what cycle awareness brings. It brings this new kind of dignity to our experience, and a new feeling of rightness about who we are and how we are, and as we change. So
I love that. And I also think what I love about that is that we're talking about this in terms of the menstrual cycle, but it is kind of evident in all aspects of our life. So, you know, even if we're suffering with pain in a different area, it's still that same kind of cycle. And so what I love about that is that there's like a wisdom beyond all of life that helps us with everything. But we're just talking about it in the context of kind of the menstrual cycle. So I love that, because it reminds me of other aspects as well as that. So for anybody who's just suffering in general, it's quite nice, even if it's with something else. Now, you also said when I invited you on to chat, you said that you'd love to chat about how the menstrual cycle is your inner guidance system par excellence. So I don't know if we've already covered that, but I wondered if you could kind of explore a bit more about how creativity ties in, because I know that's a big part of your message as well, and kind of that creative power and harnessing that through the cycle.
Well, yes, I mean, the menstrual cycle is the creative cycle.
Yeah.
It is, it's so, a woman or a menstruating person has the creative process sort of built into their body. So Sjani's described the different seasons of the cycle, and each of those seasons are phases of the creative process as well. So that the menstrual cycle can literally support you to manifest something in the world. It's a magnificent thing in that way. So, for example, menstruation is a natural visioning time, Nicole. If you can stop and just really let go, you'll get these huge downloads that come, like creative ideas. It's the sort of creative honeypot, you know, where you get, and these ideas are very much connected to who you are. They aren't just some random thing. They're actually, we use the word calling. Your calling can speak what you're really here to serve, what you're all about. So it's so wonderful if a woman is feeling adrift in her life and she doesn't know what to do. I always say to them, bleed on it. Give yourself space at menstruation, really drop in, and then notice how you're spoken to. It's like you get these divine downloads. It's exquisite. So there's our first part of our creative process. You have ideas, you have a calling. And of course your calling is huge.
Yeah, and
it's really massive.
Because you're kind of quietening down at that time. It's like offering up a space to hear them, maybe.
Beautiful, exactly. You do, you create this spaciousness. And in fact, I mean, I don't menstruate now, but I only have to sort of go off for a gentle walk and just sort of let go of everything, or even just lie down for a moment and just have empty space. And suddenly ideas are popping in me. If I'm ever stuck on something, I just walk away. I love it. I walk away and I do nothing. And then suddenly, bingo, there it comes. Bang. So it's the empty space.
Yeah, a big part of my message is that we don't really need to do anything in order to fix ourselves or heal ourselves. It's like, no, we actually need to do nothing and just have that space. And it's like in that space, all the wisdom kind of just appears.
It's I love the empty space. It's incredibly powerful. And we're terrified of giving ourselves that these days. But actually, that's where, you know, the pot of gold is really. And then the subsequent stages of the menstrual cycle help you to realize that calling, because it's one thing to have a genius idea, but it's another thing to sort of to produce something, to take that out into the world and realize it. And you know, we teach on this whole creative process in great detail, but each phase, so the spring phase is where you just start to play with the idea and allow yourself to experiment. And this is a very crucial stage where your inner critic isn't allowed in at all. You know, it's like, but you, in the menstrual cycle, in your pre-ovulatory or inner spring phase, you've got this natural motivation and natural focus to kind of, you've got daring, because I think a kind of foolhardiness actually at this point. And I think all creative projects get off the ground because someone was foolish enough to say, what the hell, let's just try it. You know, and if you haven't got a bit of foolhardiness, you know, you're not going to get out the door. But you have that in your pre-ovulatory phase. And then the summer of the cycle, the inner summer, the ovulatory time, you're very in the flow then. And, you know, there's a stage in the creative process where you just have to do the work. So, you know, writing a book for us, you know, we're starting to write another one. And it's just that phase where you've just got to get words on a page, you know, you just got to get it down. It's just right. But in the summer of your cycle, you've got this lovely natural energy. You're kind of on top of the world. You've got chi in the system. There's an optimism. And if you've done your preparation well in the previous phase, you're carried by that summer energy. It's just very, very, very cool, actually. And then, of course, you know, we move into what we call the autumn phase of the menstrual cycle. And in terms of the creative process, that's the more reflective phase. So you've done all this, hopefully you've done a lot of, let's say our book idea, you've done a lot of writing. But writing doth not a manuscript make, you know, as we both know. You have to bring in that polishing and editing, that discerning, the critical eye. Well, you have a natural critical eye in the autumn that is able to see what's working and isn't working. And I just love to share this story. You know, when we were writing Wild Power, and we'd be pretty smug and pleased with what we had, you know. And then Sjanie would go into her autumn, into her premenstrual phase, and she'd be looking at it and going, that doesn't work. That's just not congruent. I'm going, what the heck? It's perfectly fine. You know, we're right up against a deadline. We're tired. And I'm going, don't you dare, Sjanie. Don't you dare tell me. You know, 2 days ago, it was just fine. You can't now tell, no. And she would not. So funny. And she was bloody right. She was so right. It's really cool. It's
so
just
interesting
so great.
when you can suddenly see something so clearly that you couldn't
see before. I mean,
and that's what happens in the premenstruum. You get this incredible discernment and this like ferocious coherence. Like you just, if things aren't congruent, you just like something just gets you. You know, you can just feel it. It's like not quite it. And I can get quite picky. I'm like, not that, no, just that word is not it, you know, pick that word. But, you know, in the end, it actually makes a different kind of composition that really has a different sort of resonance. So, all praise be to that critical capacity that we have in the
Absolutely.
autumn, and how it really serves us in the creative process, because as Alexandra said, it takes like a kind of first draft into a polished final manuscript. It really evolves whatever you've initially created. It has to go through that mill to come out more robust and ripe and ready for the world. So our cycles do all of that for us.
Yeah, and we're human at the end of the day, and so we kind of want the full rich experience. We don't want to just be living this. I think so often we think the creative process is just like that.
Yeah.
And that
is such a good point, Nicole, because I was actually thinking that autumn phase, that critical phase where you're doing all the discerning and editing, it's not a comfortable phase, let me tell you, because our little old egos are going, ouch, no, this was perfect, you know, my work.
And like beautiful sentences are being culled and like
thrown out, you know, that chapter's, you know, got to go.
We used to do something quite funny. Do you remember this, Alexandra? We've now gone back and looked at that document. We actually created a separate, this was just to take care of our sensitivity and preciousness. We created a separate document called like binned sentences, like sentences we loved dearly that we had decided we didn't fit or whatever, and we couldn't just delete them because we loved these sentences, so we just put them in another document almost to like trick ourselves into the fact that they weren't really gone. I mean, they were gone.
They were gone. We've never gone back there.
That was how we dealt with our own like fragile egos. I'm like, no, but I love that sentence. That sentence, I remember writing it. It was so precious. Yeah. You know, it's not an easy phase at all, and it's really hard to
and you can feel a little bit broken actually at the end of it, and there is a moment in the creative process, and it really tallies with the menstrual cycle, where all you want to do is just walk away and go, oh boy, this is, oh boy, shit, I'm out of here, this is,
you hit a wall and you just can't go on anymore. You hit this wall and it's just like enough, you can't see the wood for the trees, you run out of energy, and it all just starts to look shit. I mean, do you know, where it all just like starts to look the same, it all just becomes sort of meaningless, and it's all like, you don't know what you're doing anymore. That point in the creative cycle is, it's tough, and you've got to know what's happening when it happens.
Yeah, and I guess this wisdom just kind of reminds you that that's okay, because it's going to flow back to being in flow and everything looking wonderful at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but what's actually going on here? What's going on here is really interesting, because you have a creative idea, Nicole, but your ideas are much bigger than who you are in that moment. And as you're crafting this thing that you're creating, you're simultaneously growing yourself to be able to manage this baby, if you like. And you know, this process of sort of being broken down by that critic, which is what it can feel like at times, is actually really like tempering you. It's calling you to really grow some muscle to meet, because when you know, once your baby goes out into the world, it's going to have a life of its own, and you've got to be able to manage that, the consequences of that. Because not everyone's also going to like what you do, by the way, or they might challenge what you do, and you've got to be able to stand for what you've, you know, put out there. So you're actually, the whole creative process is growing the psychological muscle in you as well, to be able to manage this thing that you're creating. That, if that, does that make sense what I'm saying? Yeah. It's a whole maturation process that we underwent. We were kind of little innocents when we started out. By the end of writing Wild Power, I think we had a bit of muscle by the end, didn't we, Sjanie?
Totally. I mean, you don't create anything in the world without growing up simultaneously. You know,
yes.
Two things happen hand in hand.
Yeah.
And that's part of the beauty of creating and being creative, is that, but you're both putting something out in the world, and you are growing, you know, you're maturing in order to do that. So it's very beautiful.
I think we forget as humans that we're always evolving. It's like everything seems like it's still, and it's really not. So
that's right, Nicole. We are always evolving. It does not stop.
No. And I love that this kind of explanation kind of gives voice to that in a way, and helps people see that, because we can get stuck in just thinking that thinking that we're stuck when we're not. I think it offers that possibility, doesn't it, that we can always create something new as well. What else was I going to ask you? I was going to ask, because I know there was a lady who couldn't join us, but who's going to watch the replay, who was suffering with menopause. So I just wondered, because I don't think you touch on that in the book, but I know that you have a program about menopause as well, don't you? So what happens at menopause with all of this? How does...
Well, you know, in the creative process, we were talking about that you hit that moment where it's like you hit a wall and it's all over, and there's nothing there for a while. I have to say that's menopause for you. For a while, there's nothing there. You're coming to the end of something. It's a kind of melodramatic statement I've just made. But menopause essentially is a death and rebirth process, just what we've been talking about now. You know, you suddenly hit this empty space, and then suddenly out of nowhere a new life or a new idea comes, or a new way. Only for us at menopause, this takes place over a number of years. So, but what's important about menopause is that you're prepared for it through your conscious practice of cycle awareness. You're actually learning how to meet this, what we call death and rebirth process. It's a huge topic to talk about.
I know. I thought that when I asked it, I was like, this is going to be a big answer.
This is going to be a big answer. And I don't know if I can do it simply, but I think I want to say some really strong, clear statements about menopause, because I want women to feel really dignified, because menopause is a real moment of awakening. I talk about this death moment, but in that death moment, you're actually waking up. And a lot of that emotional reactivity that's going on for women, rage is one of the top feelings that comes up for women, and grief, but just sort of general reactivity and everything, is because you're suddenly seeing and knowing things that you didn't before. You're going, oh my God, I've put up with that all these years. And oh, why have I been doing that? That's not who I am. Or just this feeling of, I just can't do that anymore. I just can't, it's just not me. And initially it's all about, no, it's not that. No, I don't want to be with that person, or I don't want to be with that person in the way the relationship currently is. You know, I'm just sick of that role. I want something different. And it's just like this huge death process. And in death, usually when we experience death in any way, we just want to walk away. And really that's what menopause women need to find a way to do, is to find a way to take time and space for themselves. Not to, well, I mean, in a way, we need a gap year. in a
Yeah.
phrase or two.
Yeah.
What a menopause woman needs is a good old-fashioned gap year where she goes, bye-bye world, I'm pissing off now. Work it out for yourself. There's a bit of food left in the freezer, you know, and then you'll just have to work it out for yourself because I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I don't want to know about anybody or anything for a while. And this is perfectly healthy and perfectly normal. The only trouble is, of course, we can't because we have children we're raising, we've got jobs, we need money coming, etc. But frankly, I'm encouraging women to find ways to take their version of a gap year. It might be a gap weekend or a gap evening once a week that's all yours, where you don't have to care for anybody, because that's what you need. You need to have no responsibility for anybody so you can profoundly be with yourself. And the moment you start to have that space for yourself, Nicole, then the awakening can really sort of happen. You start to really get clear ideas come. You think, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. It's very clear to me. You know, I remember, it's not a tidy process, by the way, menopause, but I just remember that moment where I went, oh, it's over in Australia. I'd been in Australia for 18 years at that point. I thought, no, it's time to go back to England, where, you know, I've always been self-employed, so, and I hadn't been working in England, so I thought, oh, how am I going to do this, you know? And I'm going to stop being a therapist, which was the work I'd been doing for, you know, a whole huge chunk of time. And so, you know, I still got many years of living. I need an income. But of course, it was my calling that was what I wanted to do, just this work, you see, which I had been quietly cultivating on the side. But there's this momentous moment where you go, no, I have to stop that job. I just cannot do it. And I was actually good at it. I had a good, healthy practice, you know. There's one part of me going, what's she doing? You're good at this, you know, it's, why can't you? No, I just can't do this anymore. I just got to get out.
Yeah.
And it's pretty wild. You just know you have to stop doing things. But then, so initially it's all about no, get rid of this, get rid of that. Then you even shedding clothes. I remember I culled so many of my books, about a third or a half of my books. I thought, nope, they're all history now. They've got to go. And then the yeses come. Yeses come. Oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. This is what I'm about. And then there's magic that happens when you're bringing this, when you're working it consciously. Then there's a real magic that kicks in. You know, I just had synchronicity after synchronicity paving my way to unfolding this calling, you know, paving my way to UK. You know, it was extraordinary, the synchronicities.
So it comes back to trust again. And
it's but trust all the way. If I had stopped to think about the detail, if I'd sort of done my figures, you know, geez, I need this kind of money to live. You know, I did have savings. I wasn't completely foolish. But if I'd sort of thought about the details of what it, you know, would take to start to set up something that people didn't know they needed, because there was hardly a kind of menstruality industry. I was creating it.
Yeah.
There was nothing there.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's profound trust. But I had built, and all women, you know, potentially have this in them, is that I had grown to know myself more, because you get this huge revelation about your own nature as well when you go through menopause. And I had grown something. I mean, I had established something in the world. I wasn't without inner and outer resources.
Yeah.
And I was carried. I was held by my calling. I couldn't abandon it.
And are there, I guess, if you're kind of suffering physically with the menopause as well, is that a sign that you need to more deeply listen again?
Oh my God, yes. And you need rest. There's a huge amount of detail in that I haven't gone into, but there's a huge amount of repair work that's going on physically. I mean, our bodies are tired. I mean, so many of the menopause symptoms are to do with exhaustion.
Yeah. And I guess that's the same throughout the cycle as well. If we ignore that wisdom, it's kind of going to create something for us to make us listen, I guess, right?
Precisely, Nicole. Yeah.
Amazing.
Right, I just want all the menopause women who listen to this to know that there's a very powerful process going on at menopause. That it can be a dignifying event, and all our work at Red School is about teaching women how to experience menopause in this way, and to trust menopause, that there's a kind of intelligence at work, that you've And to trust menopause, you've actually got to start trusting yourself. You've got to believe, validate the feelings you're having are real and meaningful. And our workshop and our courses so on really unpack that.
Yeah, it sounds very much like it's very much all about kind of trusting and accepting the natural rhythm of life, which is basically what I kind of share with kind of more mental health stuff, and it's just knowing that there is a wisdom behind it all, isn't it, I guess, and allowing that to unravel a life that you love, which is kind of what I've described this series of conversations as. But I wonder if you guys can tell us a little bit more about Red School then, because I know that you also have a course that was starting fairly soon as well. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. So the course that's starting is a live online program over 6 weeks. It starts on the 18th of February, and it's called the Wild Power Immersion. And it's really a exploration and an experiential discovery of the power of your menstrual cycle, where we go through the different inner seasons and really work deeply with each one and support you in your cycle awareness practice to tap into the inherent power in each phase and really occupy these different phases of the cycle so that you can feel more whole, that you can really have access to these different aspects of yourself and these different phases of your life experience. So it's a really good course, and it's a fabulous community. We ran it for 3 years now, and this is the 3rd year, and it's just such a good community of women, isn't it, Alexandra?
Yeah, they're already having fun.
Already, I mean, we haven't even started.
There's a party going on.
There is such a good, just the community of women around this work are so really wonderful. Such a lovely sense of support and companionship, and it's something I think very powerful about us sharing our experiences of the cycle, because it helps us to recognize really the rightness of them and how there's just this commonality, this common ground that we all share, and that is dignifying. So that's the Wild Power online immersion, and the website is wildpower.online. And then for those going through menopause, we run a live online menopause workshop later in the year, 6 weeks as well, and that is redschoolmenopause.com is the website for that. We've also got some sort of ongoing self-study programs that you can find at redschoolonline.net, as well as a free one. So there's lots to dive into there.
Yeah.
Did you mention the menopause in-person workshop, Sjanie?
Oh yes, actually for anyone in the UK, we've got it happening on the 7th and 8th of March.
In Worthing.
Yeah, 2 days in Worthing. That's good. We don't actually run those often at the moment because we're busy writing a book. So if you're interested in being there live, this is the time to do it.
Yeah, grab it.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the first speakers we had on, and something that I advocate is kind of staying in the conversation about wisdom, because I think the more that we spend time kind of engrossed in these conversations and noticing, it just helps that awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really great way that, having that community to kind of explore together. I think when you're always pointing in the direction of wisdom, that's what's most helpful, because it's kind of like, we don't really need to look to what's broken. It's better to look to how it really works and who we really are. So I love that you guys have that kind of community feel going on, and that's kind of why I created these conversations, because it makes sense to me to just help people see that there is a wisdom behind life, and even the body has its own wisdom, and it is about trusting and accepting. And so I think that's really kind of, again, backed up what we've been experiencing through these different topics and exploration of different topics. It's just it applies to everything, doesn't it, really? But I love that it's kind of focused very much on the menstrual cycle, and I can really see the link to the creativity as well. The only other question I think I had was about kind of issues with with people's cycles. So if people kind of are suffering miscarriages, or what happens when you're pregnant, because that was something I just had as a question when I was reading the book. I was like, oh, this is great, but what's going on when people are suffering things like that, or when they're pregnant, what happens in the cycle then?
Those are quite a few, lots of different questions. They all sort of have different answers. Which one should we go with? Pick one. The pregnancy or the cycles problems?
Whichever.
Let's start with cycle problems.
Okay, cycle problems. That's a good one, because pregnancy is a whole other story.
It is a massive one, actually, the pregnancy one. Yeah. The menstrual problems are multifactorial. It's always important to remember that. And but at the back of all symptoms, any kind of symptom, is inflammation, is stress. And the system is stressed in some way. And we have to remember that the menstrual cycle is the stress sensitive system in women. That's where stress first shows up. So menstrual cycle awareness, working with your menstrual cycle, is a remedy in and of itself, because the moment you start to work with your cycle, a layer of stress falls away. So instead of fighting to be the same all the time, trying to kind of stay in top gear all the time, you allow yourself all these different gears. You allow yourself time to really power ahead. And when your body's feeling low or just more inner and quiet, you allow that. When you do that, a whole layer of stress falls away. You're nervous. You're actually pacing your nervous system when you're pacing the menstrual cycle. Yeah. So your whole nervous system is just that much more soothed and easy. And that makes a difference to your symptoms. So some period pain can be eased altogether by simply stopping at menstruation.
Yeah. Wow.
All period pain can be reduced or eased in some way. Some can actually be cleared up. But then you combine that with other self-care practices like diet, because diet's radical in healing menstrual problems. And then, certain supplements, herbs, and so on. And you really have a potent remedy for healing. And the other thing is, of course, environmental pollutants, because they show up in the endocrine system first. So detoxing is just essential for healing menstrual problems. But the baseline is to remove that first layer of stress of fighting the cycle. If you're fighting the cycle and, taking all these supplements and just fighting the cycle, it's not going to work.
It comes back.
It's incredible. It's just magic how it works. It's working with the cycle and the power of just stopping at menstruation. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Absolutely. And I suffered, so I can speak to women who have suffered. I can kind of look them in the eye because I've been there. I know what it is to have hideous pain.
Yeah.
And Sjanie, do you want to perhaps in a way that sort of, miscarriage, I don't think we can really comment on because it's just too huge a thing. Yeah. But what we do know is that working with your cycle is medicinal for anything. And, and I'm sure that, someone has experienced miscarriage. At first, of course, the cycle's probably the enemy because, they want to be pregnant and they're not. But it can also be the path of healing something, both emotionally and physically. And in fact, there's a beautiful blog on our website of a woman who experienced a miscarriage and how cycle awareness really saved the day for her in dealing with that. It's very powerful.
Oh, I'll look out for that then. And maybe I can share that in the resources as well for anybody who has been suffering. That's amazing. Thank you very much. That was such an insightful conversation. So thank you both for sharing your time. And I'm sure people will be watching this back and getting a lot from it. So Yeah, and you've given us your website address, haven't you? So I'll pop that in the link as well on.
Thank you very much, Nicole.
Website. But yeah, thank you very much. So I'll just share what's happening next Friday for everybody who's at home and who wants to know who we've got next week. So next Friday is Valentine's Day. Oh, I didn't realise that actually. It's the 14th of February. We're going to be back at the same time. We have a lady called Jessie Lynn McDonald who talk to us all about being alone, confidence, esteem and self-love, which is a great topic for Valentine's Day. And actually I've written an article for a magazine about this, which I can share during February as well. But Jessie Lynn is, like me, a clarity coach, 3 principles practitioner and facilitator, and her focus is on mental health, resilience, well-being and potential, helping individuals transform the direction of their lives in relationships, separation, divorce, as a parent, or their mental health and well-being. She describes herself as helping people let go of the mask of fear, self-judgment or doubt, feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or in search for more out of themselves, their relationship or their lives. So yeah, she's on a mission to empower everybody basically to be the best version of themselves, and we're going to be chatting all about that in relation to self-rediscovery and kind of self-love and all of that sort of stuff about being alone, embracing being alone as well, next Friday. So if there are any questions, because I notice we haven't got any at the moment. Somebody did message me to say that they were going to catch up on the replay when they left because they had to leave early. So yeah, there aren't any questions, but I did have some kind of in advance, so we covered those about the menopause. So
oh, brilliant, great,
lovely. Yeah, thank you very much. And
thank you very much indeed, Nicole.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share, or your?
No, that's good. Let's have a good weekend.